Divine messengers rarely choose illiterate farm girls as their instruments. Perhaps that's why no one saw Jeanne d'Arc coming, except Jeanne herself. We are in Domrémy, 1428. The 100 Years' War has ravaged France for nearly a century. English forces occupy the north, including Paris. The rightful king, Charles VII, once mockingly called the King of Bourges, rules only the lands south of the Loire River. Contested from all sides, he faces the ambitions of the Duke of Burgundy, Philip the Good, who is allied with the English. Paris, the crown jewels, and the sacred coronation site at Reims all lie in enemy territory. In a modest stone house, more sturdy than the wooden dwellings of her neighbors, lives Jeanne Romay, known to history as Jeanne d'Arc. At 17, Jeanne is brown-haired, robust, and stands at 5 feet 1 inch tall. The daughter of Isabelle Romay and Jacques d'Arc, a respected farmer and local official, she is no simple shepherdess, as legend would later claim. Her family is relatively prosperous. They own oxen and a plough. She has 3 older brothers, Jacquemin, Jean, and Pierre, and 1 sister, Catherine. Unlike the poorest peasants, she has time for devotion between her duties of cooking, sewing, and spinning. Between attending Mass and helping her mother with housework, Jeanne gazes toward the ancient oak forest where village children once danced and hung garlands to honor spring. As England and France tear each other apart, she listens to tales of war. Her village has been raided. The husband of her cousin was killed in combat. Paris is in enemy hands. The king remains uncrowned. At the village well, other girls tease her about her devotion. There goes Jeanne to church again. My mother says she's at confession so often, the priest must grow weary of her voice. Jeanne ignores them, drawing water without responding. What sins could you possibly have to confess? Perhaps I pray for you, since you seem to have forgotten how. At 13, alone in her father's garden at midday, Jeanne heard a voice accompanied by a blinding light. "Be good, Jeanne," the voice commanded. "God is with you." Terrified, she crossed herself. The voice came again, and over the following weeks revealed itself as the Archangel Michael, accompanied by Saint Catherine and Saint Margaret. The voices told her France will be saved through her, that she must lead the Dauphin to his coronation at Reims. For 3 years, Jeanne kept the voices secret. Unaware of her divine apparitions, her parents arranged a marriage for her without her consent. Jeanne announced to her family that she has made a vow of chastity, a private vow to God. By choosing the divine over the earthly, she claims the right to abandon any man of this world. Thus, she frees herself from the unwanted engagement. When she finally spoke of her mission, her father was outraged. "Father, I must leave for Vaucouleurs. I am to meet with Captain Baudricourt. You'll do no such thing. What business does a girl have with the captain of a garrison? I must tell him to send me to the Dauphin. France will be saved through me." "This is madness. No daughter of mine will shame our family by running with soldiers." "It is God who commands me. Then God can find another messenger." But the voices grow more insistent as the military situation worsens. In 1428, the English lay siege to Orléans, the last major city defending the Loire. If it falls, all of France will be lost. At her cousin's home near Vaucouleurs, Jeanne confides her mission. Though skeptical, he agrees to take her to the fortress where Robert de Baudricourt commands the last royal garrison in the region. Guards eye the peasant girl suspiciously as she approaches Baudricourt's quarters. The captain, a gruff veteran with a reputation for wenching and crude humor, barely glances up from his meal when she enters. "What village sends this petition?" "I come on my own, my lord, sent by my king in heaven to speak with the Dauphin. I must lift the siege of Orléans and see him crowned at Reims." "Holy Mother of God, you actually believe this?" "I know it, sir." "Go home, girl. Take her back to her father," Baudricourt tells her cousin. "Give her a good slap and be done with it. The world has enough false prophets without adding peasant girls to their number. You mock what you do not understand. By mid-Lent, I must be with the Dauphin, even if I wear my legs down to the knees to get there. The English have 20,000 men at Orléans. What would you do against them? I would do nothing. God would do everything." Undeterred, Jeanne returns to Vaucouleurs repeatedly over the next year. A prophecy already circulating throughout the kingdom works in her favor. France, lost by a woman, the infamous Queen Isabeau, who had disinherited her son, would be saved by a virgin. Jeanne seeks to embody this prophecy, to become the virgin who will save France. By January 1429, Baudricourt wavers. This obstinate girl has won supporters among the townspeople. Perhaps there is something to her claims. Convinced by her charisma, he writes a letter of recommendation to Charles VII. The townspeople, moved by her mission, take up a collection. Through their donations, Jeanne obtains her first sword, men's clothing, a horse, and has her hair cut short. Baudricourt provides an escort of 6 soldiers. The journey to Chinon, where Charles holds court, spans 11 days and 300 miles across enemy territory. They travel at night, sleep in forests, and ford swollen rivers. The fact that this young woman reaches Chinon unharmed is later regarded as her first miracle. When Jeanne arrives at the royal castle, Charles VII is skeptical but desperate. His treasury is so depleted that the queen's dresses must be patched. Orléans is on the verge of surrender. Rumors of this strange peasant girl claiming divine guidance reach him, and he grants her an audience. It's a February evening in 1429 when the king receives Jeanne in his private room. The decor she discovers is rather sober. The bed is trimmed with red and white taffeta, and a canopy with hangings adorns the wall. The only real luxury for the era is a personal toilet connected to the royal bedroom, a significant privilege in the early 15th century. Charles studies the peasant girl kneeling before him. Some councillors dismissed Jeanne as a lunatic or Burgundian trap. Others, desperate for any advantage against the English, urged the king to see her. "Rise, they tell me you have travelled far to reach us. I have come because God has sent me to your aid, gentle Dauphin." Charles pauses at the title. He has been proclaimed king for 7 years, yet this girl addresses him as Dauphin, a clear breach of protocol. "Dauphin? I am king, crowned or not. You will be truly king when heaven makes it so. And you believe heaven speaks to you? I know it does. My voices have told me of your need. What does heaven tell you of France? That Orléans must be saved, that you must be anointed at Reims, that God has not abandoned this kingdom, though it may seem so." Something in their exchange moves the king, though he remains suspicious. Not yet entirely trusting this peasant girl, he sends her to Poitiers to ensure she is not being manipulated by the devil. For 3 weeks at Poitiers, theologians and lawyers interrogate her. Is she a witch or a lunatic? Matrons examine her to confirm her virginity, a critical point in establishing her divine credentials in medieval minds. One theologian questions her, and she responds sharply, "I understand you better than you understand me." When they ask for a sign of her divine mission, she answers, "The sign I will give is to raise the Siege of Orléans. For this, I was sent." After more than 20 days of interrogation, the verdict is in. And finally, although the specific details aren't known, it seems she convinces everyone of her sincerity. Her enthusiasm is particularly striking, and the interrogators conclude their report with a cautious, "We'll try, we'll see." Jeanne then returns to Chinon and undergoes rapid training in using weapons. The king provides her with a sword and armor and lets all of France know that God has sent them a messenger. Charles VII's entourage now circulates propaganda materials to the towns loyal to him. These materials describe Jeanne d'Arc, her physical appearance and clothing, and tell the story of her arrival in Chinon, how she picked out Charles VII, even though he was hiding among his courtiers. It's a significant gamble, as Jeanne d'Arc hasn't actually accomplished anything yet, but Charles is now thoroughly convinced by her. Indeed, the king has now sanctioned her divine mission. She immediately sends a bold letter to the Duke of Bedford, the commander-in-chief of the English army in France. "To the Duke of Bedford, you who dare to call yourself regent of the kingdom of France, hand over the keys of all the towns you have taken to the one our Lord, the King of Heaven, has sent. If you refuse this, then know that I will drive you out of the kingdom of France." Jeanne then sets off for Orléans with an army of 4,000 men, led by some of the kingdom's most renowned military leaders like La Hire and Gilles de Rais. At Jeanne's request, dozens of Dominican and Franciscan friars also accompany the troops. It becomes a true crusading army, alive with songs, prayers, and what often resemble processions. News of this divine messenger coming to aid the besieged city creates immense hope among the people of Orléans. On April 29th, 1429, Jeanne arrives near Orléans and immediately encounters the Bastard of Orléans, later known as Dunois. A trusted man of Charles VII, the Bastard commands all military operations around the city. Their first meeting is stormy. "Why have we not attacked the English? The situation requires careful. You have diverted me from my primary goal. I came to drive out the English, not to wait. Mademoiselle, we must cross the Loire, and the winds are against us." Then the wind changes direction. A miraculous chance for the Bastard and his entourage. The entire French high command witnesses this. From this moment, the captains of Orléans are convinced that Jeanne is truly sent by God. Thanks to this wind change, they cross the Loire and slip through the English fortifications. They enter the city on the evening of April 29th to a triumphant welcome. Jeanne takes residence in the Duke of Orléans' treasurer's home. The inhabitants constantly remind her to keep her promise. While dining, a delegation of citizens approaches. "You promised to deliver the city. When will this happen?" "I promised it. I will do it. Let those who love me follow me." But the bastard commands at Orléans, not Jeanne. She faces mistrust from hardened warriors. For these rough men, obeying this young girl is not obvious. Despite Jeanne's impatience, Dunois waits 5 days before launching any assault. The English have installed bastilles, small forts positioned directly facing the city walls. To pass time, the restless maid appears atop the fortifications and shouts at the English. An English soldier calls out, "You there! Come with me and you won't be a maid much longer. Wretch, you will be dead tonight." Indeed, the next day, the soldier is found drowned. Gradually, she establishes her authority. She imposes discipline against blasphemy, chases away prostitutes, and enforces moral discipline that transforms her forces into the righteous side, and God gives victory to the righteous. Besides divine help, Jeanne can count on 12,000 Scottish men and horses who came to help France when the French army was defeated. On May 4th, Dunois finally goes on the offensive against the Bastille Saint-Loup with 1,500 soldiers. Against all expectations, Jeanne is not present. She is napping, uninformed of the attack. Suddenly she rises, feeling that something is happening. She grabs her armor and weapons and rushes to battle, furious. She charges to the front rank. As a leader, she rushes forward, and others, carried by her enthusiasm, follow. Once they take the first fort, the captains want to wait. "We must attack, attack, attack," Jeanne insists. Dunois now trusts her and continues the offensive. Victories follow. 2 other bastilles fall. On May 7th, the French attack the best defended fortress, Les Tourelles. During the assault, an arrow strikes Jeanne between her neck and shoulder, going 15 centimeters deep. Her wound is treated with olive oil and bacon. Olive oil for its antiseptic qualities, and bacon as an emollient to soften the flesh and help remove the arrow. The English think the day is won and expect the French to withdraw. But then she reappears that very same evening, terrifying the English who were convinced she was dead. They panic, suddenly seeing French soldiers everywhere, even though there aren't nearly as many as they imagined. In their disordered retreat, many of them fall into the water. It's at this point the English exclaim, "This is impossible! This girl must be using witchcraft!" Orléans is the symbolic victory proving Jeanne kept her promise. All France knows it now. She is truly God's messenger. But, realistically, it was also because the royal army proved effective. There were the Scots, and Dunois showed himself competent. But in the minds of the people of Orléans, it was Jeanne. News of Orléans spreads throughout France and beyond. Even in Paris, an English stronghold, a court clerk sketches Jeanne in the margin of an official document, the only contemporary image of her. For Jeanne, this is just the beginning. Her voices urge her toward the next objective, bringing Charles to Reims for his coronation. But the traditional coronation city lies deep in enemy territory, behind a series of occupied towns. Military advisors counsel caution, but Jeanne is adamant. Against conventional wisdom, Charles agrees. The army advances northward toward Reims, a journey considered suicidal by military standards. One by one, towns surrender without resistance. In the city of Patay, the French engage the English in open battle for the first time in years. Before the battle, Jeanne makes an unusual inquiry. "Do you have good spurs?" "What? Are we to flee?" "No. The English will flee so fast you'll need spurs to catch them." The battle unfolds just as she predicted. A deer startles the English archers, revealing their positions prematurely. The French cavalry charges before the English can set their defensive stakes. 2,000 English soldiers die. The French lose just 3 men. As the army approaches Troyes, the city refuses entry. After days of standoff, Jeanne tells Charles, "Noble Dauphin, order your men to prepare for assault." She begins arranging siege equipment, though in reality they have few such weapons. The psychological effect works. The city surrenders the next day. On July 16, 1429, Reims opens its gates. Fearing a change of heart from the wavering King Charles VII, Jeanne does everything to ensure the coronation takes place the very next day. This ceremony, one of the most important in French history, is also one of the most improvised. The presence of this young peasant girl alongside the king makes it the most extraordinary coronation Reims has ever known. She stands near the altar, contrary to all customs, for it is truly to Jeanne that Charles VII owes his coronation. For the king, the story should end there, but Jeanne sees it differently. The natural continuation of her campaign must be the reconquest of Paris. As the kingdom's capital for centuries, Paris holds the principal institutions of royalty and Christianity's most precious relics in Sainte-Chapelle. Jeanne hopes Paris will surrender, as other cities have done. But this logical step for Jeanne is not so for the king, who is immediately reluctant. Paris is no simple matter. It is surrounded by exceptional fortifications. Whereas the English had spent 8 months besieging Orléans with its 5-meter walls without taking it, Paris has walls 8 meters high with 2 moats and has never been taken by assault during the Middle Ages. After a month of discussion, Jeanne finally convinces the king. However, Charles VII's delays mean the army arrives before Paris in August 1429 without siege machines. His earlier failed attempt to retake the city in 1418 left a bitter memory. His troops pillaged and demanded ransoms, making them hated in Paris. Despite this unfavorable terrain, Jeanne decides to attack in early September. During the assault, a crossbow bolt pierces her leg, but her determination is undiminished. Charles VII, far less determined, remains in the background, doubting more and more. When she thinks of resuming the attack, Charles orders the retreat. From the siege of Paris onward, Charles VII and Jeanne are no longer on the same page. Jeanne wants to continue the war. Charles wants only to return to his castle south of the Loire and prefers costly negotiations, which Jeanne finds neither logical nor sincere. After the Paris failure, Jeanne seems almost burdensome. The king gradually distances himself, entrusting her with small battles that she also loses. The epic shrinks to nothing. For Charles, the time of war is over. He intends to negotiate with the Duke of Burgundy. To prevent rash initiatives from the Maid, he invites her to the castle of Sully-sur-Loire in March 1430, home to a pro-negotiation councillor, Georges de la Trémoille, whose growing influence works against her. These months at Sully show a troubled Jeanne, torn between her entrusted destiny and a catching reality. She grows bored, thirsting for combat. When Compiègne, a city loyal to the king, is besieged by Burgundians and English, Jeanne sees a repetition of Orléans. She must rescue them. She leaves Sully without truly taking leave of the king, joining the fight around Compiègne with a few companions, telling them her mission and her life will soon end. On May 24th, 1430, she conducts a sortie against the Burgundian camp. This time is the right one. This sortie will be victorious. Initially, her strategy works. But as surprise fades, enemy reinforcements rush the gates. Inside Compiègne, Captain Guillaume de Flavy closes them, trapping Jeanne. Whether by accident or design, she cannot retreat. A Burgundian squire pulls her cloak. She falls from her horse and is taken prisoner. After 6 months of captivity, the Burgundians sell Jeanne to the English for 10,000 livres. She could reasonably expect a ransom, but Charles VII maintains silence and takes no steps to save her. Ungrateful, the king she gave everything to abandons her. Everyone knows, if the English buy Jeanne d'Arc, it means death. The English, determined to erase her influence, decide she must be tried not as a prisoner of war, but as a heretic. They choose their venue carefully. Rouen, France's second largest city, and England's continental stronghold. The religious authorities there are completely devoted to the English cause. When news of Jeanne's capture reaches England, they see an opportunity. To destroy the legitimacy of Charles VII, they must prove his greatest triumph. His coronation was the work of a witch, not a saint. They select Pierre Cochon, Bishop of Beauvais, to lead the prosecution. Ambitious and politically aligned with the English, he personally arranged her purchase from the Burgundians. The choice of an Inquisition trial is brilliant. Once declared a matter of heresy, the French king cannot intervene. Any attempt would make him suspect of heretical sympathies himself. If Jeanne is proven a witch, Charles's entire coronation becomes a mockery, and Henry VI of England's claim to the French throne stands validated. Jeanne faces overwhelming odds. In the great hall of Rouen Castle, she stands alone before not just 2 judges, but dozens of assessors, sometimes 50, even 100 men, all aligned against her. At 19, she has no lawyer, no advocate, only her wits and her faith. Will you not kneel before a man of God? I would kneel before a true man of God. I see only a man before me. Your pride condemns you further. Do you not fear for your immortal soul? My soul belongs to God, not to you. You claim your voices come from heaven, yet you disobey the church. How is this not heresy? I obey the church in heaven before the church on earth. There is only one church, and I am its representative here. There is one church, but God stands above all men, even bishops. The most dangerous moment comes when Cochon springs his theological trap. Are you in a state of grace? Jeanne knows the snare. Answer yes, and she is guilty of the sin of pride, claiming to be a saint. Answer no, and she admits to being a sinner unworthy of divine guidance. If I am not, may God put me there. If I am, may God keep me there. When uncertain how to respond to particularly complex questions, she often replies, I reserve the right to answer that after consulting my counsel, meaning her voices. Enough! Recant your lies. Admit these voices are fantasies, and you may yet live. I would rather die than deny what my voices have told me. If I said otherwise, I would damn my soul. You wear men's clothing against church doctrine. Why do you persist in this sin? I am guarded by men, not women. Would you have me defenseless among soldiers? Your so-called voices are nothing but the whispers of the devil, deceiving a simple farm girl. I know the voice of the devil. It sounds much like yours. But these dramatic confrontations represent only a fraction of her ordeal. Most of her time is spent in horrific prison conditions, chained each night to a massive wooden beam she cannot wash, cannot change her vermin-infested clothes. The denial of communion torments her pious soul more than any physical suffering. Some reports suggest her captors constructed an iron cage so narrow she could barely move, chained at neck, wrists, and ankles. Whether or not this extreme measure was used, her conditions are deliberately brutal, designed to break her spirit before her execution. After 4 months of interrogation, Cochon attempts to terrify her into submission by showing her the instruments of torture. She remains defiant. You can torture me if you wish, but afterward I will say that whatever I confessed was said under torture. Frustrated by her resilience, Cochon orchestrates a final psychological assault. On May 24th, 1431, without warning, guards bring Jeanne to the cemetery of Saint-Ouen. A pyre awaits her. Platforms have been erected, one for the judges, another for the condemned. Jeanne, called the maid, you have been found guilty of heresy, witchcraft, and demonic communion. Your punishment is to be burned until death. However, the church is merciful. If you recant your errors, your life may be spared. A written confession is thrust before her. The flames await just yards away. Even the strongest spirits can crack under such pressure, and in this theatrical staging designed to terrorize, Jeanne finally falters. What will happen if I sign? You will live. The church is ever merciful to the penitent. I cannot read. Make your mark only. A simple cross will suffice. She scrawls an X at the bottom of the confession. The maid has recanted. Let all bear witness. Returned to her cell in women's clothing, Jeanne expects transfer to a convent. Instead, the same English guards surround her. She realizes she has been deceived. On May 28th, when guards enter her cell, they find her wearing men's clothing again. Whether the English deliberately removed her women's garments, leaving her no choice, or whether she changed of her own accord remains unclear. Her explanation is simple. My voices have returned. I was wrong to deny them. I retract the confessions that were torn from me. I am ready to die. As a relapsed heretic, her fate is sealed. On the morning of her execution, in a moment that defies explanation, Pierre Cochon, who condemned her for heresy, grants her communion, breaking all church customs for condemned heretics. On May 30th, 1431, in Rouen marketplace, she is brought to the stake wearing a mocking paper cap labeled Relapsed Heretic. Her shirt has been treated with sulfur to accelerate the flames. 800 English soldiers ensure order among the crowd. A priest holds a crucifix high so she can see it through the rising smoke. Her last words echo across the square. Jesus, Jesus. To prevent any relics from inspiring future devotion, the executioner displays her charred remains to the crowd, then burns them twice more. Her ashes are scattered in the Seine River, but her legend cannot be so easily dispersed. Even as English officers congratulate themselves on eliminating the witch, her myth grows. Rumors spread that someone else was burned, that Jeanne escaped and lives in hiding. In the following years, young women claiming divine missions emerge, each declaring themselves the true Jeanne d'Arc. Some, like Claude des Armoises, even gain recognition. She is quite open about her supposed past, regaling anyone who would listen with tales of her adventures. Jeanne's family and the people of Orléans are so convinced by her claims that they immediately halt the tribute ceremonies held in memory of the real Jeanne d'Arc. This Jeanne bears a striking resemblance, with similar mannerisms, voice and gestures. She speaks in parables and recognizes people who had supposedly known her. She basks in the attention for 4 years, receiving lavish gifts and attending countless banquets held in her honor. Emboldened by her success, she even requests an audience with Charles VII, King of France. However, this would prove to be her downfall. Charles, no fool, asks her a question known only to the real Jeanne d'Arc. Unable to answer, the impostor is exposed. She confesses to her deception and begs for mercy. The conviction of Jeanne d'Arc still weighs heavily on Charles VII 18 years later. As soon as Rouen is liberated, the first steps towards a retrial begin. Overturning Jeanne's conviction is incredibly important for Charles. It is a way for him to clear his own name and show that his coronation and early successes didn't come from a woman inspired by demonic spirits, but rather from one inspired by God. Since the church authorities conducted the original trial, Charles VII can't request its annulment himself. So he pressures Jeanne d'Arc's family. Her mother travels to Paris and pleads with the judges for clemency. She explains that she had a good, honest Christian daughter who was unjustly condemned. To restore her honor and her family's, this unfair trial must be overturned and a new one opened. Pope Calixtus III, who is more sympathetic to the French, finally agrees to reopen the trial in 1455. Then 115 witnesses come forward to praise Jeanne d'Arc, further magnifying her epic story. Notably, we hear from 6 or 7 of the original judges who participated in Jeanne's initial interrogations. They readily switch sides. Everything is different now because the political situation has radically changed. Jeanne d'Arc is exonerated, and Charles's legitimacy is no longer questioned. After this, the maid gradually fades into obscurity. The monarchy, which becomes absolute from the 16th to the 17th century, has no desire to publicize that it owes its throne to a simple peasant girl. Ironically, by allowing her execution, the king inadvertently contributed to the growth of her legend. Jeanne d'Arc, the Maid of Orléans, had fought valiantly against the English for the glory of France. In 1920, nearly 5 centuries after her death, the Catholic Church canonizes Jeanne d'Arc as a saint. But long before this official recognition, the people of France had enshrined her in their hearts. The peasant girl who changed history, the illiterate who confounded scholars, the teenager who led armies, the maiden who saved a king, the martyr whose faith inspired a nation. At a dinner in Paris shortly before her canonization, a French general raises his glass in tribute. To Jeanne d'Arc, not the saint, for saints belong to the church, but the warrior maid who belongs to France. His companion corrects him gently. To Jeanne, who belongs to the world.